Just a quick second video in terms of just setting things up before we take measurements. Once we've gone through our preferences and that's all set up okay, and we've checked that we're getting a remember I spoke to you about making sure levels, we're getting a good input level for measurements. Once we've checked all that, that's fantastic. Now in terms, just quickly before we take a measurement, this is part of the instructions for the UMIC. One instructions from the Mini DSP. I think, what is it, Mini DSP web page, can't remember, sorry. This is quickly just important to check. We bring up this, and this is basically how we check volume. Check the volume in the system of the output, and the reason that's important is because you can keep track of where you are. So again, it can be to do with like equalization and stuff as well, but I think it's important to know what you're outputting, so that if you're measuring your speaker, left speaker and your right speaker, that you're outputting the same SPLs and just silly things like that. So it's something worth checking. And I don't know if this actually has any effect on the actual readings itself, but it takes a couple of seconds to do it, and I've always done it, so I would suggest doing so as well. So just quickly start again. So we bring up SPL meter, calibrate. You can use subwoofers, but I generally use the speakers to check this. Now as soon as you click OK, again it's going to play a pink noise through however you've got it set up, whether you've got it set up for left speaker or a right speaker or both speakers. And then generally I just use a Radio Shack SPL meter and just cross-reference the volume that I'm getting on the SPL meter with this volume here. So whatever the SPL meter says, I change it and put it in here. Now when you come to do that the next time around, generally this figure corresponds very, very closely to what the SPL meter is saying. So I think it's part of calibration again of the system, hence the word calibrate. So it's definitely worth doing and definitely worth checking each time you do a measurement. That especially if you're measuring speakers and subwoofers, because the output's completely different. So you need to change that if you're measuring it independently. But if it's just speakers, they're probably going to be roughly the same. But it's definitely worth inputting this just quickly before you take a measurement. So once that's done, fantastic. Quickly on taking the measurements, which is the top left button. So it's a couple of things to pay attention to. One is this, the length of the measurement. Now years ago, my cousin, who was doing research trying to find best ways and best practices for using REW, he read someone had suggested to change this from the lowest to the highest. I can't remember why, there was a reason for it. However, it's something I've done, so I always run I think it's a 1 megabyte length sample. It's supposedly slightly more accurate or something like that, is what he told me. So that's something that I personally do. Something that's extremely important, especially if you're measuring at loud volumes, depending on what we're going to do and parts of the measurement and what you're going to check. Look at the start frequency, because speakers don't generally start, that will generally be at 0 Hz, so speakers don't play that low. And it's entirely up to you whether you want to put a lot of volume at low frequency through your speakers. I personally don't think that's a good idea. So that's at 10. That's what for subwoofers. But for speakers that have got a cutoff frequency at maybe 40 or 50 Hertz, then you maybe want to start the measurement at say 30 Hertz or 40 Hertz, just so that you're not putting a lot of power through the speakers, expecting them to do a lot of output in bass. It's I'm sure it doesn't do any damage, but it's just about being mindful and looking after the speakers, the investment you've spent a fortune on. Similarly with the M frequency. Now I stopped measuring at 5 kilohertz because when I was doing with my speakers were quite new the last time I was taking measurements for them. I didn't really want to put a lot of volume from at very high frequency. When you listen to this output, it's not indicative, it's not relative, or not a good example of what you get from just general sound. It's literally a constant sound that starts at a low frequency and goes up to a high frequency. So I don't know, I was a little bit paranoid about putting very high frequency, high volume sound through my new speakers, so I cut off at 5,000. Obviously speakers, some speakers will put out sound even though you can't hear it up to 20,000. So again, just worth being mindful here of what actually you're putting through your speakers, and just my advice is play safe. I'll play safe personally. It's too expensive to replace any damaged units. So I'm not guaranteeing you will damage units, but I'm not saying that you won't either. So just be careful. And I've literally just noticed this. Obviously, it appears like you can choose left, right, or both. Now, obviously, I output digital into this, and what I normally do is I normally use the Windows sound drivers, basic Windows drivers, to take out the balance, to take out the volume of the left channel, take out the volume of the right channel for whichever channel I want to measure, or have them both in. I'll quickly show you in a second. However, I've just noticed that I might not need to do that. It could be a case of just clicking left and right, and that automatically changes over left channel and right channel. Now that, it's worth checking. That makes life so much easier. By comparison, I would normally go, obviously, control panel. Just quickly shut that. I would normally go control panel, obviously sound. It brings up your sound drivers. Oh, they're there. Sorry, I couldn't see them. Put them in the middle. So for me, this is what I normally use, the SP diff out on the Asus sound card. So if you go into properties and you go into levels, which is at top tab, and balance, that's basically left channel and that's the right channel. So to test my left speaker or left subwoofer, I just take the right channel out, and vice versa. To test the right speaker or the right subwoofer, I take the left channel out. Now, it's easy to do, it takes a couple of seconds. However, it can be a pain in the backside sometimes if you make the mistake of closing that and not just leaving it open, and you have to go through the whole process of control panel backup and sound. So I'm guessing that in here, left and right and both, is literally left channel and right channel, and that makes life so much easier. Now, when you're ready to take a measurement, you literally just hit start measuring. You can put a delay on it if you want to get out of the room or something like that. I've not really used that much, if I'm honest, but that does work. And you'll see here, the same as when we were checking levels in the last video, this is kind of your baseline level, and this is the measurement level, and you'll see that rise, and go through part of the measuring. And it's quite an interesting process, funny enough, to be in the room when it starts the measuring, because your system's outputting like a constant amplitude, frequency sweep. Wherever you are in the room at that time, you can really hear how much the sound goes in and out, especially in the bass. It's literally, depending on how lucky you are and where you're standing, but it's literally in and out and louder and quieter, and that gives you some idea of how off a room is in terms, especially bass. It's so easy to hear how off it is, and then that is kind of what we're trying to measure and trying to look at. With the process for this, is what it's all about, or some of what it's all about anyway. So again, a lot of words. I hope that's helped. Just give you a bit of an indication of what we do. So just quickly on one other thing is, when we're checking REW, go into Windows and into Windows sound down in the bottom right hand corner, and just make sure. See, for me, oh, it's not letting me do it now for some reason. It's probably because this is open. Quickly shut that down. Oh no. Oh, earlier on it was letting me change. It doesn't matter. Just when you check, just make sure the volume's at maximum. Basically, is what I was really just going to say. So make sure whatever your output is. See that's again SP diff output from my Asus sound card. Just make sure that's at maximum, because again, it's just about getting the right volume, reading. So basically, the right amount of output to be able to take a to make a correct measurement. Then what you don't want to do is have this really, really low and have your system turned up to ridiculous volume just to try and get a decent reading. So just make sure the sound output from the computer is at its maximum. That way it allows you to have a decent setting on your preamp, for example, decent volume setting on your preamp. That's just something to bear in mind. Obviously, I'll do another video, hopefully with a little bit more detail on measuring, after measurements, what we're looking for, just to give people an idea really of where we are, and hopefully this is helpful. Trying to write this all out on a forum would be really difficult, so I'm hoping this is going to help people. Lovely, take care.